It seems like Donovan Mitchell has been linked to trades or leaving in free agency for a long time now. But ever since the Rudy Gobert trade a couple weeks ago,
why would the Jazz do that?
Things have picked up a lot. And the other day, Woj reported that the Jazz were willing to listen to trade offers for him. And then last night, Shams reported that the New York Knicks and the Utah Jazz have started discussions on a trade that would send Donovan Mitchell to the Knicks. Now, being a Jazz fan myself, I'm kind of desensitized to a lot of this stuff just because Donovan Mitchell is always linked with Miami or New York, or he wants to play in a big city or whatever. So the reports that have come out the last couple weeks have not really been very surprising to me. But at least this time, the reports are coming from Woj and Shams. They're not just coming from an anonymous Eastern Conference scout like some of the other reports. But I think this is kind of an interesting situation here for both teams. With the Jazz, it kind of seems like it's headed for a rebuild. They traded Rudy Gobert for a ton of picks and other assets. Mike Conley certainly seems like he's going to be traded. And Shams even reported that no one on the Jazz roster is untouchable. So it does certainly seem to be heading towards a rebuild. And so the logical next step in that would be to trade Donovan Mitchell and get as many assets back as you possibly could. The thing that is difficult for me, though, is that the Jazz were in a pretty good spot several years ago when they had Gordon Hayward. They beat the Clippers in the playoffs, and then Gordon Hayward decides to leave. The Jazz were kind of in limbo. No one really knows what's going to happen. Then they get Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert, and both of them have developed into top 30 players in the league. They had the best record in the NBA last season. They've struggled to get playoff success. But in my opinion, a lot of that is due to the roster building around Mitchell and Gobert. They gambled on trading a lot of assets for Mike Conley, which was not necessarily a bad idea at the time. It just hasn't really worked out for them. He's been a little inconsistent. He's been injured a lot. And so it's just kind of weird for the Jazz, because if they do decide to blow it all up, trade away all their assets, and rebuild through the draft, since that's what it's going to have to be for Utah. A small market, we hardly ever get any free agents, and so it's going to have to be a rebuild through the draft. It kind of seems like we're just back to square one. Like, we just rebuilt through the draft. We just have had Donovan Mitchell and Gobert and this roster that has had a lot of regular season success but has struggled in the playoffs. But it's kind of come out that the Jazz, like Rudy Gobert said this, and I think the Jazz front office agreed, that their window has kind of closed. If they were going to win a championship, then 2021 was probably their best chance. There was a lot of injuries to stars. In fact, even when they played against the Clippers, Kawhi was injured, but they couldn't beat the Clippers with an injured Kawhi. That was probably that was the same year that they were the number one overall seed. It's just kind of disappointing that they got that close, and then now they're just blowing everything up. Danny Ainge does have a great history of drafting and building through the draft. I mean, he built the 2008 Celtics by draft and also by trade and free agency and whatever, but the current Celtics team, that was built almost entirely by Danny Ainge through the draft and smart acquisitions. Brad Stevens has certainly made changes and helped to perfect it, but Danny Ainge was the one who built most of that team. And so that does give me hope as a Jazz fan. Like, if anyone is going to be rebuilding my team, Danny Ainge is certainly going to be very high on my list of people that I would want doing it. But I don't know. I just feel like even if we trade all the assets away, get a bunch of draft picks, rebuild, I feel like we could be in literally the same position in like 5 or 6 years. Well, to be honest, after 2021, I remember after the complete and utter collapse against the Clippers thinking something has to change this offseason. Otherwise, it's gonna be the same story again next year. And in my opinion, they didn't really make any changes. They signed Hassan Whiteside and Rudy Gay, and none of those were really things that they needed. It didn't put them over the top. And so going into this offseason, everyone could kind of see that something was going to happen. And it's happening. As I was looking at things, I thought, well, they'll probably change like maybe one or two things. The three things that could change were a new coach, trading Gobert, or trading Mitchell. And I thought maybe one of those things would happen. I didn't anticipate two of them happening, and I definitely didn't think all three would happen, which it kind of seems like is probably going to happen. But anyways, that's enough about the Jazz. Looking at this trade idea for the Knicks, they just made all these moves to get Jalen Brunson, and now they're looking at Donovan Mitchell. They've been interested for a while. To be honest, I don't know how I feel about a Donovan Mitchell, Jalen Brunson backcourt. That's probably like the shortest backcourt in the NBA, and lots of people have talked about how that backcourt would be terrible defensively. I also, having watched Donovan Mitchell for the last few years, I think he's a great player. I just don't think he's going to put them over the top. If they sign or if they trade for Donovan Mitchell, if they're able to keep RJ Barrett, they have Jalen Brunson. We'll see what else happens with the roster. That's a pretty solid core, but I think they would still need one more star. Like I don't really see RJ Barrett becoming a number one option. And Donovan Mitchell, yes, he's a great scorer. He's great in the playoffs, but he struggles defensively. And so while it is a good option for the Knicks, I don't know that it really puts them over the top. The Knicks have not been good in a long time, and so I can't really blame them for trying to make this trade happen. I don't think this doesn't make them better than Boston. It doesn't make them better than Milwaukee. It doesn't make them better than Miami. I don't think it even makes them better than Philadelphia. And then you go down the rest of the list, maybe they're competing with the Raptors, but I still think the Raptors would be better than them. I don't know. I don't think this trade is going to put them over the top, but it could be a good first move. And if it's a first move that sets up more moves for them, then I think it could be good. But like I said, I just don't think that core of Mitchell, Brunson, Barrett, I just don't think that's not a championship core right there. You need another star, an alpha to complete that roster. Anyways, it's an interesting trade. I do think Donovan Mitchell will get traded. If not this offseason, maybe at the trade deadline or sometime during the season. But you have to remember, this is Danny Ainge that teams are working with. He's not just going to get rid of Donovan for nothing. He's going to get the best possible return. We'll see what happens. But what do you guys think about this trade idea? Where do you think Donovan Mitchell ends up? Do you think this is a good move for the Knicks? Do you think it's a good move for the Jazz? Let me know what your thoughts are down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.